What it do, flight crew? FTC. Flight team stand up! It may be May, 2 weeks, and June is on the way. We got chillin' boom! Try not to get scared. / potential, or actually most definitely crime 2 in 1. Man, this title looks crazy as hell. Chillin' scares killers who stole their victim's identity. Do you know how much of a hater you gotta be to end somebody's life and then try to be like that person? People like that just gotta be launched into outer space and just let them, you know what I'm saying, float away. Wherever they end up, that's where they end up, man. Man, if you out there doing that dirt out there, you better stop while you're headed, because this technology is only getting even better. Get your snacks at the popcorn. I'm not responsible for y'all jump scares, by the way, and I know I scared y'all in the beginning. You don't gotta play tough with me, man. It's a safe place.
1997, a severe fire broke out at a small white bungalow on 50.
By the way, I did see the if y'all in Cali right now, be safe. The wildfires are happening again like it happened last year.
Months after, a badly burned woman came out of the house and made her way to a neighbor's door. That neighbor, Monica Joy Boyd, knew the two sisters who lived there, Stevie Alman and Sarah Mitchell. They looked alike enough that people sometimes mistook them for twins. But the burns on the woman in front of Monica were so severe that she couldn't tell which sister she was looking at.
Damn.
The woman told responders someone had thrown something flammable through her window. She identified herself to paramedics as 52-year-old Stevie Alman. According to her, drug dealers had surrounded the house and thrown Molotov cocktails through the window in retaliation for years of her reporting drug activity and giving police video of deals outside the home.
Them niggas pulled out a Call of Duty weapon. The Molotov thing.
Stevie was known as a responsible and dependable person. She'd lived in that house for years, and according to family, she'd been the one stable presence in her younger sister Sarah's life, letting her stay for free, covering for her when things fell apart. But that summer, Stevie had reached her limit and told Sarah it was time to move out. As the ambulance pulled away, neighbors gathered outside the burning house and started asking about her sister Sarah. She told them Sarah had moved out of state weeks earlier. But before she could answer any more questions, she was rushed to the Alta Bates Medical Center in Berkeley. Within days, reporters came to the hospital to interview her and ask her about the attack. Stevie issued a public statement from her hospital bed, urging neighbors to keep up the fight against drugs. About a week later, she wrote a 3-page handwritten letter that was released to the press. It is difficult to imagine people could be this cruel. I have no doubt they intended to murder me and burn my house down on top of me. The story of a 52-year-old woman standing up to drug dealers spread quickly and became much bigger than a neighborhood fire. Well-wishers across the country sent her cards and letters, as well as donations totaling more than $4,700. Local contractors offered to rebuild the home, and California Governor Pete Wilson announced a $50,000 reward to help police find whoever was behind the attack. Even the White House called the hospital to pay their regards. By that point, Stevie had become a symbol of ordinary people standing up to violence in their own neighborhoods. But this narrative fell apart within just 2 weeks when the truth broke out from Stevie's own family. Another sister to Stevie and Sarah had seen the news coverage from the hospital. Even through the burns, something about the woman's behavior on screen didn't sit right. She filed a missing persons report for Stevie Alman, which was a strange thing to do for someone who is supposedly the one lying on the hospital bed. So when police asked this sister about her suspicions, she said Stevie was a quiet and private person. Stevie would never have filmed drug dealers. She wouldn't have even acknowledged them. She would have looked the other way. She wouldn't do anything. Now, this might sound like a strange reason to question someone's identity, but she wasn't identifying her sister from a scar or a facial feature. She was identifying her from her personality, something only a sibling who grew up with her would know. Investigators who were already chasing suspects behind the firebombing now had to consider whether the woman recovering in the hospital was actually who she claimed to be. When police brought her in, Stevie denied everything. However,
roll the top food with a 10 gifted.
After going through her belongings, investigators found 2 IDs inside her wallet. One for Sarah Mitchell.
My bad.
And one for Stevie Alman. Brought her in, Stevie denied everything. However, after going through her belongings, investigators found 2 IDs inside her wallet.
Sweating, bro.
One for
First
Sarah
time
Mitchell
smoking.
and one for Stevie Alman. So they took our fingerprints, and the results came back to a match to a previous arrest made 26 years earlier in 1971. The woman in the hospital was Sarah Mitchell, which raised a disturbing question. If Sarah was pretending to be her sister, where was the real Stevie?
What?
On July 15th, investigators went back to the house on 50th Avenue with this new information. Almost immediately, they started seeing the contradictions in Sarah's story. Broken glass from the windows was found outside the home, not inside, which is the opposite of what investigators would expect if someone had thrown a Molotov cocktail through the window. When investigators looked again at the burns on Sarah, the pattern didn't match someone fleeing a firebombing. It matched splash burns, which a person normally gets when they start a fire and catch the initial flare. Now, there were multiple other pieces of evidence, but the most disturbing one was found in a 4-foot-long deep freezer near where the blaze had started. The outside had been charred by the fire, but the insulation meant to keep the food frozen had also protected what was inside. When investigators opened the freezer, they found the dismembered remains of Stevie Allman, sealed in with duct tape. Her skull had been crushed by a blunt object, and her body had been cut at the arms, legs, and waist. The bathroom where Sarah had dismembered her sister had blood on all 4 walls and
Your own sister?
and the ceiling. Stevie had been in the kitchen the entire time, while her killer, her sister, accepted the whole nation's sympathy and donations using her name. The case did not go to trial until November 2000. On November 21, the jury convicted Sarah Mitchell of first-degree murder. She was sentenced to life without parole.
Man, them eyes are scary as fuck, man. I'm telling you, man, you can really see right through people, man. Yo, this bitch like the motherfucking devil, bro. Look at their fucking eyes, my nigga. Dude. Sad
On
shit,
April
man.
4th, 2024, a passerby walking through Kersal Dale in the UK found parts of a human body wrapped in cling film inside an abandoned concrete bunker.
Damn.
Kersal Dale is a local nature reserve along the River Irwell. It's a stretch of beach, woodland, and wetland paths used mostly by dog walkers, runners, and bird watchers. The wider Kersal area is no stranger to crime. Police have run multiple operations here over the years, targeting drug networks and gang activity. But even with that history, this was something else entirely. Detectives later described it as one of the most unprecedented investigations Greater Manchester Police have ever conducted. After finding the remains, police immediately opened a murder investigation, but no one matching the victim had been reported missing. At the time, investigators didn't know the remains belonged to a 67-year-old Stuart Everett, a retired civil servant who lived at 195 Worsley Road in the UK. Stuart had lived there since 2013. It was a modest terraced house where he was the leaseholder, and over the years he sublet the other bedrooms to Polish migrants. Stuart had no kids of his own and had never married. The people closest to him were his brothers and sister in Derby, who called him Benny. Sadly, Stuart had suffered a stroke a few years back, which slowed his speech and left him walking with a stick. But it didn't stop him from helping out his community. Being the son of Polish immigrants himself, he ran English classes for the newly arrived immigrants in Manchester's Polish community. That was how he originally met a man named Marcin Majorkowicz. By 2017, Marcin had moved in with Stuart, and by 2024, they'd been living together for 7 years. In that time, the two had grown close. Close enough that Stuart had started telling friends and family Marcin was his partner. In one email from 2021, he wrote to a friend about Marcin's tattoos, his shyness, and how the two shared just about everything, including Stuart's email account. At the time, it probably read like a harmless thing between two people who shared a home. But years later, that access would become one of the most unsettling parts of the case. Marcin was 41 years old and had been living in the UK for nearly 20 years. But by November 2023, his life started to fall apart financially. He was unemployed and had taken out roughly £60,000 in loans. He also owed another £13,000 on credit cards, which he hadn't made a payment on in months and couldn't cover his rent. By early 2024, the question was what he was willing to do about it. On the evening of March 27th, Stuart was sitting on a sofa bed in Marcin's bedroom. They were watching a football match like they did most evenings. But at some point that night, Marcin struck Stuart on the top and back of his head at least 4 times with a heavy blunt instrument, most likely a hammer. The force was severe enough to cave in Stuart's skull. Pathological evidence later showed that Stuart survived just long enough to inhale blood into his lungs before he died.
Oh
The
my
murder itself
gosh.
was the first step in a disturbing plan Marcin had been building for weeks. At 8:11 a.m. the following morning, before moving Stuart's body, Marcin sent a message to the third housemate telling him Stuart had gone to his brother's house for Easter. In reality, he had spent the previous night dismembering Stuart's body on the bedroom floor using a knife and a hacksaw he recently bought specifically for this purpose.
What?
He separated the body into at least 27 pieces, wrapped them in cling film and bin bags, and packed them into shopping bags small enough to carry on.
Bro. He doesn't deserve to be on Earth, bruh. Guys, I want you to hear this one more time. He already unalived him, and then he chopped up his body in 27 pieces. Like a bro. He said
public transport. Before 10 a.m. that same morning, he left the house carrying the first of those bags. Over the following weeks, Marcin knew that same morning, he left the house.
I bet you this person that he walked right past,
public transport.
He probably said, hey, what's up, good morning, afternoon. Didn't even fucking know.
10 a.m. that same morning, he left the house carrying the first of those bags. Over the following weeks, Marcin made at least 11 separate journeys by foot and by bus, taking Stuart's remains and spreading them across the nearby area, including parks, woodlands, and nearby waterways.
That is disgusting.
One of those journeys led him to Kersal Dale Nature Reserve, the place where the passerby had originally found Stuart's lower torso and legs.
Ugh.
So, by this point, the police had part of the victim's body, but no missing person in Derby matched the description. Unfortunately, this wasn't by accident. Disposing Stuart's body was the second part of his depraved plan. The third and final part was to steal his identity. Marcin used Stuart's phone and sent a message.
Bro, this gotta be the most sickest, hating ass shit that I've heard, bro. Unalives the dude. Chops his body up 27 times. And then he wants to steal. He wants to be him, bro. Steal his identity, everything. Like, fam, get a fucking job, bro. Crazy thing is he put all this energy into this. He could have put his energy in probably the most simplest thing and been like half a millionaire, probably a multi-millionaire, something, bro. You choose to wake up and do this weird ass shit. I just got the email. Yeah, I'm gonna have to do some editing and shit on the Spurs game. They hit me with that block. At least I'm happy we streamed it though.
Family in Derby, telling them he'd fallen ill and couldn't speak on the phone anymore. So, as far as his family knew, Stuart was still alive and well and had been messaging them all week. Keeping the lie alive meant he could control Stuart's money without raising suspicion. He hired a mover to clear out Stuart's belongings and rented a dumpster to dispose of anything that was left. When the family started noticing things disappearing, he told them Stuart was moving out. At one point, he even filmed inside another property and sent them the footage as if Stuart were showing them his new place.
Nah, that's fucking crazy, dude.
With nobody questioning why Stuart had suddenly gone silent, Marcin
started... sometimes, that's why you gotta even still, bro. Like, even obviously check up on your loved ones. Just pull up, you know what I'm saying? Even if it's like for 10, 15 minutes. Man is literally...
everything Stuart owned. Using Stuart's login details, he changed the passwords to his bank accounts, accessed his government gateway and pension details, and even started applying for a loan in his name. But as much as he wanted to avoid a direct confrontation speaking as Stuart, he couldn't avoid it forever. When Stuart's phone company needed to deal directly with the account holder, Marcin picked up the phone and answered in a slow and slurred voice, mimicking the stroke Stuart had suffered years earlier. Even on his brother's birthday, Marcin sent a handwritten birthday card. By then, Stuart had been dead for 2 weeks.
What?
The Manchester Police's specialized
CCTV
unit had started reviewing thousands of hours of footage from the surrounding area. Eventually, they identified a figure they started calling the Heavy Bag Man, who stood out because of the way he moved. On CCTV, he could be seen leaving the house with heavy bags and visibly struggling with the weight, and later returning empty-handed. Investigators traced his bus journeys and slowly narrowed his home area down to Winton. They started spending time in the area looking for more CCTV footage.
Bro, I know when they was reviewing that footage, they was losing their mind. They like, damn, like it just doesn't end. Because if you heard it, I believe he said he went to like 7-something plus locations to like separate the 27 pieces of this man's body that he fucking, like, bro, they were tripping out, bro. I know, man.
On April 25, 2 of them were driving an unmarked car when one of the investigators glanced at a man in a dark beanie and recognized him.
What?
They followed him to the bus stop and called for backup.
Sheesh.
Before the bus drove away, a uniformed officer stepped in and pulled Marcin out in handcuffs.
Yo, happy birthday, Cringe.
California.
Got him.
You're detained for the purpose of a search while you ascertain your identity, okay?
Weird ass nigga. Picking on the elderly, bro. That man couldn't defend himself. He would never do this to somebody that's in the gym 5 days a week, bro. Like.
Can you double check, please? Double check his pocket. It's definitely a mistake.
Maybe 100%.
I know, I appreciate that. All we've had is information passed to us I'm also investigating a serious matter as to where you may be involved.
Happened on
Just on the... Not right now. Not today, but it has happened recently, okay?
In his possession at that moment were Stuart Everett's phone and bank cards. Investigators later found out that Marcin was planning to permanently leave the country that day and had been searching for properties in Spain weeks earlier. Marcin was charged with murder. His trial began at Manchester Crown Court.
And bro, the fact that he did something like so like gruesome and disgusting like that, unfortunately, bro, that's not even his first time doing it. He probably has any 3 to 5 plus, probably even more, that he did to victims just like that. It's just his first time getting caught.
Or nearly a year later, in March 2025. Marcin never testified at trial. When the verdict was read, he showed no emotion and never apologized to Stuart's family.
What?
Only a third of Stuart's body was ever recovered, and Marcin refused to assist investigators in locating the rest. He was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 34 years.
Marcin Mijokovic, for the murder of Stuart Everett, I sentence you to imprisonment for life. Taking account of all the relevant
You gotta remember, also, yeah, it is overseas.
circumstances and the aggravating and mitigating factors that I have set out, the appropriate minimum term will be 34 years.
The judge confirmed the murder was
So it's not guaranteed life. He could still have a chance to get off after that 34, bro. He needs to be released in outer space, bro. Let him float away. Like, what the hell wrong with this nigga, man? This dude chopped up an older man's body, unalived him first, chopped up an older man's body, GTA. Went to 7+ locations, spread out his body. And then, on top of that, he takes his identity and is trying to act like them, messaging his family, basically catfishing. Like, he literally snuck on Earth, bro. There's no way. Like, I refuse to believe that is a real human.
Meditated and motivated entirely by financial gain. 5 days before the killings, he looked up how much it would cost to borrow £50,000. With £60,000 in unpaid loans, credit card debts, and unpaid rent, Marcin's answer to his money problems turned out to be Stuart's life. A life which was brutally ended, and for weeks after, his identity was stolen by his killer.
Crazy, man. R.I.P. everybody.
On August 29, 2010, a group of trail bike riders cutting through the fire trails of Belangalo State Forest between Sydney and Canberra, Australia, found human bones scattered across the forest floor. Among the remains was a skull. There was also a small silver earring, a single child-sized sock, and a decomposed women's t-shirt with one word printed across the front: angelic. For the next 5 years, that word was almost all the evidence investigators had about the victim. They ran her DNA against every state and federal database and cross-checked her against every open missing persons report in the country. But no one matching her description had ever been reported missing. This could have meant one of two things. Either no one was looking for her, or someone had made it look like there was no reason to. Because of how little evidence the case produced, investigators named her the Angel of Belangalo. By late 2011, the case had been open for over a year without any progress. With no leads left, police reconstructed the woman's face from her skull and recovered hair, hoping someone in the public might recognize her. The result was a haunting image. When the sketch was released, 35 tips came in from people who thought they recognized her. Sadly, every single one of them fell apart on follow-ups. By 2015, 5 years had passed, and the Angel of Belangalo was still unidentified. The only people trying to figure out her identity were the police, which raised a disturbing question. Why hadn't the family of the victim reported her missing? Or did they think she was still alive? Her real name was found out to be Carly Pierce Stevenson, a 22-year-old mother from Alice Springs in Australia's Northern Territory. She had given birth to a baby girl, Candelise, in 2006 when she was only 17. By late 2008, Carly had been seeing a 34-year-old man named Daniel Holdham for around 2 months and wanted a fresh start. So, in early November, she packed her car and left Alice Springs with him and Candelise. To Carly's family, the decision came out of nowhere. Her Aunt Sharon would later tell 60 Minutes Australia that the announcement was, quote, a bit of a shock. Their plan was to head south down the Stuart Highway and find work in Adelaide. By mid-November 2008, Carly's life started falling apart. She called Tanya Weber, her mother's best friend, and the closest thing she had
I'm going to try and multitask y'all to get this vid out to y'all.
Second mother.
I'm
she
listening.
Was crying and saying she made a mistake leaving with Daniel and wanted to come home.
For a week and a half after she left, she rang me up
She was crying. She just said to me that she thought she f***ed up. She wanted to come home by the sounds of things. And I said, well, I can book a flight, I can pay for a flight, do you have money? No, it's okay. And by the end of the conversation, she was sort of back to her giggly laughing self, so I didn't think too much more of it.
Sadly, this was the last time anyone who ever loved Carly would hear her voice. A few weeks later, in the early hours of December 15, Daniel drove Carly into Belangalo State Forest. What happened there was reconstructed later from physical evidence, photographs recovered from an SD card Daniel kept for years, and witness testimonies. Carly was violated before Daniel dropped his full body weight onto her chest and throat, crushing her hyoid bone with enough force to break her neck.
What?
After ending her life, he photographed her body in multiple positions, some of which closely matched the arrangement of her remains as investigators found them years later. He left her on the forest floor, partially hidden behind a fallen log, still wearing the angelic t-shirt. Over the next few days, he started erasing what was left of her. He scrubbed out her car and traded it in for an older model. All the while, Candelise was still living with him. On December 19, he took her to a nearby motel and checked in under a fake name. According to his ex-girlfriend, this is where Daniel would allegedly shove dishcloth into her mouth, suffocating her. Afterward, he wrapped her body in a motel towel, placed her inside a suitcase, and drove west into South Australia, where he abandoned it along the highway.
Bro,
The suitcase
what?
would remain
Why?
undiscovered for nearly 7 years.
What?
2.5 years.
Oh my gosh, bro. This shit keeps getting worse. Man, bro. Man, y'all gotta be safe out there, man.
Daniel used Carly's phone to send text messages to her family and friends, pretending to be her. The messages said she was living in a different city, that she was fine, and didn't want to be contacted. When Carly's mother, Colleen, grew worried and reached out, the response text she got asked for money. Colleen wired funds multiple times, believing she was helping her daughter. Daniel and his then-girlfriend kept withdrawing money from Carly's bank account across multiple Australian cities, which amounted to almost $100,000 in total. By September 2009, Colleen hadn't seen Carly or Candelise in almost a year, and her calls were going unanswered. Conversation through text had also become inconsistent. So, on September 4, Colleen went to the police and filed a missing person report. But when police checked Carly's bank account and phone records, both showed recent activity. As far as the system was concerned, Carly Pierce Stevenson was alive, and the report was closed by September 10th. Eventually, Colleen withdrew the report a month later in October. Now, some could argue that the police were insincere and lazy with their investigation. But the truth is, they were looking at the exact same things anyone else would have trusted. Her phone, her bank account, and recent activity under her name. The problem was that none of it actually belonged to Carly anymore. So neither her or Candelise were officially missing in online records. On July 14, 2015, a passing motorist on the highway stopped to see an abandoned suitcase on the roadside. Inside were the skeletal remains of a young child wrapped in a blood-stained towel with dishcloths stuffed in her mouth and duct tape around her skull.
Bro,
Police immediately distributed the images of the child's clothing across the country and publicly appealed for anyone with a lead to come forward. After more than 1,200 Crime Stoppers calls, Tanya Weber contacted police. The same Tanya who had offered Carly plane tickets years earlier. She recognized some of the clothing, which looked similar to what Carly used to dress Candelise with. Later, DNA testing confirmed the child in the suitcase was Candelise. A familial DNA comparison then connected her to the unidentified remains in Belangalo. The infamous Angel of Belangalo was her mother. By the time police came for Daniel Holdom, he was already in prison, serving time for the assault of another underage victim. He was eventually
So he shouldn't have even been out.
Miss Angel of Belangalo was her mother. By the time police came for Daniel Holdom, he was already in prison, serving time for the assault of another underage victim. He was eventually convicted of both murders and sentenced to 2 life terms without parole.
Weirdo, man. PDF, man.
In mid-July 1990, 34-year-old Beverly McGowan placed a small ad in the paper looking
Yo, this is actually one of the more sickening, chilling scares.
for a roommate to help cover the mortgage on her condo in Pompano Beach, Florida. After a few days, a woman with a polished British accent showed up at her door. But what Beverly didn't know was that the woman wasn't actually looking for a place to live. Beverly was a loan processor at Glendale Federal Bank. She was a simple woman who didn't put much of herself on display. She did have a small rose tattoo on the back of her right ankle, but most of the time it stayed hidden under the hem of her jeans. A few years earlier, Beverly had lost 2 boyfriends in separate car accidents. She'd been mostly on her own ever since. So when the woman knocked at her door, Beverly was alone. The woman introduced herself as Alice. Alice explained she was a junior executive at IBM and needed a temporary place to live while her work was relocating her. She was friendly, attentive, and easy to talk to, and within weeks she had moved in. That night, Alice mentioned she was studying numerology, an ancient belief that a person's birth date and name can reveal their personality and life path, and she offered to do a free reading. But Alice asked for everything, from her social security number, passport information, driver's license information, and bank details. Now, none of this is information most people would hand to a stranger, but after spending a week with her, Alice didn't feel like a stranger. So Beverly wrote it all down and didn't think much of it. The next morning, July 18th, a woman called Beverly's work claiming to be her. She didn't ask for Beverly's supervisor, who would have recognized her voice instantly. Instead, she asked for the head of security and said she was sick and hung up.
On July 18th, an individual calling herself Beverly McGowan calls in sick to work, and unfortunately, nobody ever sees Beverly McGowan again.
18 minutes later, 2 long-distance calls went out from Beverly's phone, booking a hotel near Heathrow Airport and a rental car in her name. Over the next 2 days, Beverly's credit card moved across Miami, building a paper trail of someone preparing to leave the country. The transactions included clothing stores, an ATM withdrawal, and a pair of shoes. Then, on July 20, it appeared at a travel agency where someone booked a one-way flight to London for July 22. Around that same period, multiple handwritten letters were dropped in a Miami postbox addressed to Beverly's brother Steve, her sister Jane, and a close friend. Each one said that she decided to sell her condo and leave town to start a new chapter of her life. Beverly's brother Steve had actually opened his letter a day earlier on July 19 and immediately felt that something was wrong. Beverly had just bought that condo and started rebuilding her life.
When I saw the letter, I was very disturbed by it. For her to leave didn't make any sense because she was giving up everything that she'd worked so hard for. And then once I was reading the letter, and I get down the bottom and I see that goodbye, I said she was trying to tell me something at that point. I can show you 100 letters from her to different people, and there's not one of them saying any more than Bev. I think that there was somebody there with her when she was writing my letter.
Trying to force Beverly to call home,
crazy,
Steve canceled her credit cards. That turned out to be a fatal mistake. The moment that card stopped working, investigators lost the ability to track down whoever had been using it. That same evening, nearly 100 miles north in St. Lucie County, a fisherman found a female body in an unspeakably gruesome state.
What?
The head had been removed, and
Oh!
both hands had been cut off. The
What?
skin over the upper left abdomen had been carved away, erasing what used to be a tattoo. It was clear whoever had done this didn't want to leave behind anything investigators could use to identify the victim. But they missed one small detail. The small yellow rose on her right ankle was still there. The police used it to identify the victim. It was Beverly McGowan, which meant the person who had booked British Airways Flight 292 was almost certainly her killer. When investigators pulled the passenger list, they expected to see Beverly's name on it, or possibly Alice's, the mysterious roommate who had vanished alongside her. But neither name was on there. The list just had a row of unfamiliar passenger names on a flight to London. One of them was a British woman named Sylvia Ann Hodgkinson. Less than a year later, in May 1991, a patrol officer in Miami Beach noticed a woman asleep at the wheel of a parked rental car. The car was overdue and the plate had been switched. When officers searched her, they found 3 separate IDs, the first of which being a British passport for Sylvia Hodgkinson. Then there was also a Florida driver's license belonging to a real woman in Orlando named Charlotte Ray Cohen, and a third license under the name Elaine Parent. For the purpose of clarity, I'll call her Elaine for the rest of this video. Elaine was caught in possession of multiple stolen IDs, so the police took her fingerprints and held her overnight in jail, but she was released without charges. Meanwhile, 5 more years passed without a single break in the Beverly case. But all of that changed in December 1996. An investigator who had been following the case from the beginning was going through old evidence for anything the team might have missed. Looking again at the British Airways Flight 292 passenger list, she ran each of the 248 names against the U.S. Department of State's database. One name triggered an alert, that being the name Sylvia Ann Hodgkinson. When they opened the Hodgkinson file, they found that it was part of a string of aliases belonging to a single identity theft. The State Department's records also showed something else. The Hodgkinson alias was linked to 2 other names, Charlotte Ray Cohen and Elaine Parent. The same names that were on the 2 other IDs recovered from the killer's wallet at the Miami Beach arrest. One of them, Charlotte Ray Cohen, belonged to a real woman in Orlando. When investigators reached her, Charlotte told them she'd never been to Miami in her life. What she did remember was a night in Orlando in the late 1980s at a bar, where she'd met a charismatic British woman who had asked her for personal numbers for a numerology reading. It was now confirmed that the woman with the 3 IDs was Beverly's murderer. Elaine had approached all of her victims in the same way, just with shifting accents and different names. And by 1998, she knew the police were looking for her. Later that year, a postcard arrived at the St. Lucie County Sheriff's Department, mailed from London. On the front was a photograph of an oil painting, a woman climbing out of a swimming pool, signed Piper. On the back, a typed message read, "Your chameleon, best wishes." She would stay ahead of the police for 4 more years, until April 6, 2002, when a rerun of America's Most Wanted aired in Panama City, Florida. After the episode aired, tips came in from Panama City residents who said a woman resembling the chameleon killer was living nearby. When officers got to the address, a woman in night clothes opened the door. She spoke in a flat American accent and handed over her military-dependent ID. But when the officers examined it closely, they noticed the rank on the ID used British military terminology that doesn't exist in the US service. It was immediately clear she was using a fake ID. Before they could take her to the station for questioning, Elaine asked to change out of her night clothes. She closed the door, walked back to her bedroom, and shot herself through the heart with a revolver. Afterwards, when officers searched the room, they found men's clothing, a gray wig, a stage makeup kit, and a fake passport. But nothing that confirmed her real identity. Whatever name she had been born with, she took it to the grave with her.
That is fucking wild, bro. Man, one thing to also learn from this, man, you really gotta watch who, like, who's close to you, bro. Like, that's obviously fucking, like, obvious, duh. But, like, motherfucking, like, don't let that shit go over your head for real, bro. Like, watch who is the closest to you. It seems like everybody, like, that for this specific crime vid, bro, like, they just all wanted to be them, bro. They just wanted, you know what I'm saying, their lifestyle. They didn't want to work for it. They despised them in every way. As soon as they, like, left their presence, they were the type of people to, like, try to nitpick everything, you know what I'm saying, that they feel you do. Like, bro, gotta watch out, man. All right, chat. I got to get this motherfucking Spurs game uploaded, OKC game uploaded. They blocked the video. I've edited it already. I multitasked while we was on stream, and it's still blocked. So I gotta, you know what I'm saying, do my magic. But at least we got the we had the stream up, so y'all seen the full thing. So you know you're gonna have a few, like, smart asses in the comments. Can y'all help me out on the YouTube side, man? It will be uploaded on the main channel within, like, the next, like, 10 to 20 minutes. They're gonna be like, "Oh, why'd you cut this part out? Hey, what are you doing?" Like, you know what I'm saying? Help me out. But hey, man, we gotta go. We will be back on tomorrow. If you did not tune in from earlier, we will be having 2 streams, 2 days tomorrow. So I will be on around, like, 10:30, 11. Probably, like, earlier than that, maybe like 10 or 10:30, and then we'll have a second stream later on tomorrow. But main channel vid, y'all look out for it. We are